You know, there are three versions of us living inside every creative. I stumbled across a quite compelling quote by Arsène Wenger, who is the legendary manager of Arsenal for over 20 years. And I'll read it so I don't mix up his words, because I think it's quite profound and it sort of got me thinking about creativity and being a creative. But obviously he's linked it to football, which within itself is a creative sport. He says, football, when you're a manager, you speak to three people. In every player is a child. The child wants to play. He's completely in the present. Then you have the teenager, him. For him, it's all black and white. They ask themselves, are they stupid or are you a genius? And then there's the adult. This is the guy that lives with internal suffering, but has to find compromise with the external world. And he's capable of that. He can find the balance to life. But when you're a manager, you speak a lot with the child, and the child is playing. And I tried not to forget that when I'm a manager, because to be creative, you have to enjoy things. If you want to do something, you have to be much more creative. And part of our job, despite all the pressure that is around us, is to speak to the child. And it's the child who wanted to play in the first place. So after reading that, it just got me thinking. So if I break it down individually and we start off with the child. So for me, what that means is that the child is obviously the person, like I said, who has the ambition in the first place. The child is the person who just wants to create, who just wants to write, who just wants to make the film, who just wants to express themselves with words in the different ways as possible. There's no pressures about the algorithm. There's no pressures about the gatekeepers. There's no pressures about permissions to be able to write, to create, to get this thing that's in your head out. All it is just having the space to just do. And that's, for me, is powerful in regards to within all of us, that child exists for something. All right? For many people, I guess in my line of work, industry is all about that creativity, whether you're behind the camera, in front of the camera, whether you're an actor, writer, director, there's a burning desire of that child that just wants to get things done and to create. And somewhere along the line, that child starts to grow up. And what happens when you start to grow up? It's like that period of when you're a child and you're innocent. It's like you're running around naked and not caring that you're naked, because you don't have the consciousness of what nakedness means. And all of a sudden you're now transitioning and sort of slightly get older, and the concept of clothes and being able to cover yourself becomes a thing. And essentially that's what happens as we transition into, as Wenger was saying, in terms of from a child to the teenager. The teenager is now more conscious about the world around them and more about themselves. And in translation to being a creative, it's now that, am I good enough? That constant self-doubt that starts to creep in, that voice becomes very loud, very quickly. It's about, can I be accepted in this circle or not? All right, looking at the metrics, looking at the numbers, starting to look at things. This voice also becomes the person that starts comparing themselves with everybody else who's doing the same thing or similar things to them. How far have they gotten? We started in the same place, they're now over there, and that now becomes a stick that they use to now beat themselves with, essentially. So now this level of consciousness starts to eat away of the joy of the child. This level of consciousness takes away from that original joy that was there, that was created. The person who wanted to pick up the pen, the person who wanted to just share their thoughts, their stories with the world is now slightly older, slightly more exposed to the world, and is a lot more self-conscious. And so they become a bit more within themselves. And then we step into adulthood. So now that teenager's grown up and they've carried all of that energy, all of that experience into adulthood. In terms of being a creative, now you're looking at who can help me expand my work. How can I be discovered? How can I go from just creating to now getting my work to the masses? And often that comes with gatekeepers. And what does that mean? What do? They decide what gets to be shown to an audience. An audience that a studio, production company, TV, broadcast have built up an audience, and essentially all we are trying to do as creative is to tap into their audience, to say, here is my work, and I want you to be able to show this to the audience that you've already curated. And then there has to be a level of quality control, because not everyone can have their work seen at that level. So yes, gatekeepers exist for a reason, especially in the old world, where only the best, only the most talented will come through. And that's not always necessarily the case. Sometimes it's always about connections and who you know. And that can also support your work being seen. So with that adult knowing what the system is like, slowly that internal suffering, in terms of how I break it down from what Wenger said, is losing control. You lose control because now the work is no longer in your hands. It now enters the person who has to make a judgment about your work. And with that judgment comes a level of anxiety, being afraid. Sometimes that feeling can paralyze you from your creativity. And if you bask in that long enough, some people lose the joy of creating, full stop. Then the rejections kick in. And often people say is you need to have heart, because the rejections will continue to come, but are you willing to be in it for the long haul? What does the rejections look like? Are you getting feedback? Because as a teacher, I can't give my student a grade without feedback. Whether they achieve the highest grade or not, they need feedback in order to know what they did well, how they did well in that, what they could improve. And that's the most important part. What could they do to improve, so the next time they do this assignment or a similar assignment, they can improve their work. But often in this creative world, you're not getting that feedback. You're just getting a rejection. So then it's left for your mind to internalize what that means. And that contributes to that suffering Arsène Wenger was talking about. And if you even want to step away from that world of passing on control to others, you're still not absorbed from this internal suffering as that adult phase. Because now, as an independent, the suffering comes in different ways, because you now have to build your audience yourself from scratch. Yes, we have a lot more tools in 2026 that allows us to be able to do that. Social media, the internet, building up your own database, your email list, and so on and so forth. But it takes time, it takes dedication to be able to do that. Being able to finance your own work, whatever that means, raising finances through crowdfunding, whether you're working multiple jobs, whether you're sending off funding applications, which leads us back to somebody saying yes to this particular work, even as an independent. So for me, that's what the internal suffering means. It's quite interesting. So the child doesn't ask if it will work. The child just wants to make things. For the teenager, this stage is where creating stops feeling like play and starts feeling like judgment. And for the adult, at this stage, it's always about somebody deciding whether your work, your creation, deserves to exist because they happen to own an audience that you don't have access to. So, what's the consequences of all of this? The pressure, the waiting, the rejection, all of these things eventually kills the child. Not literally, but creatively. With that child who's now a teenager, who's now adult, is a lot more cautious, a lot more calculated, and often is very afraid. Who am I right now? Am I still the child? Am I the teenager? Or am I going through a period of internal suffering as the adult? So last week I added another thing to the strategy, which was the Community Film Fund. So we had the launch event online over Zoom, of which about 40 people registered, and just over sort of 25 people attended the actual session. I gave the presentation in regards to where we've been, what we're currently doing, and what our ambitions are for Stolen Dreams Legacy. So for me, that child still exists. That child has to work hand in hand with the teenager as well as the adult, all right? And take the positives from all of those to try and maintain that child who wants to play, to keep them at the forefront of all of this, because that's all that matters for me. So with this particular methodology, it's all about getting the community involved, to seeing if they want to pledge and support the film. So I gave my pitch, showed them what we've done, our track record, the reviews of the films over the last 6, 7, 8 months, and what the future looks like with the new production and how we're now trying to take it to that next level. So it was a great evening, did the presentation, and there are different levels of where people can pledge their support. So if you're interested in learning more about that, if you go on my website, the link is in the bio or the description of this video, and you can be able to pledge and support. But again, that's a level of control that I'm giving to other people. Even though I have put this system in place, it's not the only strategy that I have. And the thing that I'm definitely in control of is to continue to try and build up my own audience. And over the next couple of weeks, I'm working on my main strategy, which is we're going to now transition from the physical screenings to online shared experience screenings. So not on demand. We're not going on demand, and I want to make this very clear. Not anytime soon. We are going to be having a live online screening that people can be in the same space watching the film just like they would in the cinema where we've done the screenings, but they will be in the same space watching the film, being able to communicate with each other. And after the film, just like the live screenings in person, we're going to have Q&As and people can interact and talk about the themes of the film. I'm currently working on the promotional material and all of the things before the dates are released. So stay tuned. And all of this is part of keeping the child alive and still being in control. all right? And when the time comes to explore other opportunities, which I know it will, but in order to keep the child alive, I have to maintain a level of control. So we keep working, all right? Irrespective of the rejections, irrespective of the waiting, irrespective of everything else. It all comes down to, why am I doing this in the first place? And the simple answer is because I love to tell stories, all right? And what's the next best thing after that? Is I love for people to see the stories that I've been able to tell, all right? And so that means once you have been able to play and create, it's about sharing that work. And that's the bridge, that's the part that people struggle with, because they're not in control of that next phase. That next phase, as we've been taught, is to take your work and hand it over to somebody else, for them to read it and to give you that external validation to say that yes, you are good enough, and yes, we're going to take this work and put it on our platforms, and then you can get your recognition and so on and so forth. But if those things don't happen, then who are you in that moment? Are you still a creative? Do you still want to tell stories? And for me, the answer is yes. I have many stories that I want to tell, and I'm going to keep telling them. And worst case scenario, somebody's going to hear it, even if it's my daughters, all right? Even if it's just the family. They can have access to those scripts one day when they're old enough to read it and say, okay, this is what daddy was interested in. This is what daddy was creating all of that time when he was working in the middle of the night, writing. So yeah, it doesn't all go to waste. If the world gets to see it, then great. But if not, as Denzel would say, we keep working, we'll get to work. Don't complain, all right? Because at the end of the day, nobody cares until everybody cares. That's my motto. So we keep going. See you next time.